Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's G here. Let's get right into this discussion today. Who would you be? Who do you think you would be? How would you define yourself if it weren't for colonization? Guys, subscribe to my channel and let's have a little chat. This is funny, not funny, haha, but funny. I was having this discussion. I've actually tried to have this discussion a lot of times with other Black people, and a lot of times I get to a point where they get frustrated with me and basically accuse me of being like anti-Black or something. But I was watching something recently that helped kind of support my theory a little bit, but it was talking about, and I'm gonna put the clip in here, but basically in short, a lot of things that we know as African traditions were not originally traditions. They were a result of Africans on the continent during the time of colonization, trying to keep slavers away from them. So rituals like scarification and lip plating were things that Africans started doing in an effort to keep from getting took.
So tribal marking or body scarification, whatever you want to call it, and lip plating, these African practices, right? I just found out the historical reason why Africans started these practices, and boy oh boy, my emotions are all over the place. I can't even put to words how I feel right now. So these practices started during slavery. Africans started disfiguring themselves so they would not be taken into slavery, because a slave who is deformed would not really worth much in the market. Nobody would want them. And even if anybody wanted them, they would be very cheap. So they would not really be of value to the enslavers. So Africans realized this and they started disfiguring themselves so they would not even be an option if they do come by an enslaver. So basically, these practices are nothing but survival tactics. They are not African cultures per se.
Basically. And then these things became traditions. And this is kind of what I was talking about in respects to Black Americans. When we start defining ourselves, well, first of all, let's just even start with the fact that we call ourselves Black or African American or any of these labels are all because of white people. You know, white people first started calling us Black. We took that, and of course we attached affection to it. We had to, in order to survive, right? And these labels, these definitions, and these limitations have become a part of us, a part of our culture, a part of what we define ourselves as. And in most instances, we don't have shit else to say when we want to talk about ourselves and who we are and where we start to even define ourselves individually, let alone as a collective, right? And I was saying this to someone because I think the conversation was around like colorism and how some biracial people just don't get it, right? They don't get a lot of shit that people who have different phenotypes, and I'm talking about biracial people who are white presenting or have the ability to kind of be ambiguous in some way. And I was basically saying, well, why would they? Because if you grow up in a world that has given you these different definitions of who you are, and at times, most of the times, us in the Black community uphold these things. We uphold them more than white people do because all of these definitions, all of these ideals have been so ingrained in us since, you know, the time that our ancestors were enslaved. But trying to wrap your head around how much of your culture, all of the things that, you know, we talk about it sometimes, you know, like our ancestors were giving scraps and like they made gourmet fucking meals, right? And but those things started to shape us. And when you start working on like decolonizing your mindset, decolonizing the way you move in the world, you start like really trying to examine like, the fuck, who would I be? How would I define myself if I didn't say that I was this, that, or the other? If I didn't want to say, oh no, I'm not black, I'm whatever, you know? Black folks would look at you like, bitch, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you trying to deny yourself? When the truth is, you're not denying yourself because you haven't even found yourself yet. And just to say that I'm not what someone labeled me as, because even in those labels, there are ideas that we didn't necessarily define for ourselves. And I'm talking about within our community. I'm not talking about like the outside world and how that is. I'm talking about within Blackness, right? I'm not talking about how white people treat us within that. The fact that we uphold some of these things is a problem, right? Within ourselves, within our psyche, within our DNA. Part of breaking those generational curses is changing. I mean, it's a core change, right? It's like something internally that you really have to say, I have to think differently, not just about myself, but about everyone. And I think some of us, when we do shadow work, when we're like unpacking our childhood trauma, we look at the situation and we'll say, oh, okay, like my parents couldn't do better because they didn't know better. Or, you know, we come up with ways, or we are able to redefine ourselves through our trauma, through our experiences. But doing that globally from the situation that happens like in the United States, it's really, really more in depth, because when you start trying to talk to people within the community about these concepts, we're so attached. And I guess I see it even, you know, more or so strongly when you live in Europe, and people are so attached to national identities that it's sometimes disturbing. And I guess Americans are too, but we always associate that with those like Confederate flag flying kind of people. And in Europe, it's normal, you know, to be so attached to these ideas of your nationality. Yeah, like these national identities are so important to people, and they actually really do associate it even with ethnicity, which I guess we all do to a certain extent. You know, in America, you can be any ethnicity and be American, where in Europe, they really haven't gotten to that place yet where they understand the difference between ethnicity and nationality in many instances. And I think it's one of the most interesting things about that is I feel like a lot of Black Americans, especially, I'm going to say, think that white Europeans are more evolved than the Americans you find in the United States. And in truth, not really. Like, I feel like sometimes a lot of people's mindsets here are still that of like the 1960s. And it's not that they haven't been exposed to the fact that there are other people of color in the world that live among them. They just don't accept that those people are also of the same culture. And that's one of the things that's really disturbing sometimes when you listen to people and how they define stuff. I got my kid with me. He needs some assistance. How they define identity. One of the things that Black Americans struggle with most is the idea that we don't have a home, that we were taken away from our culture, that there is something missing in relationship to that. In the United States, everyone's on stolen land. Whether they admit that out loud or not, it's true. And that's, to me, that's part of American culture at this point, right? Huh? I gotta buy stuff to make you a cake for your party day. Your party day is tomorrow.
My party day?
Mm-hmm.
My day?
Tomorrow, yes.
Yay!
Americans, you know, they have claimed ownership of the United States or America when they, you know, obviously shouldn't have. They're on stolen land. Black Americans also, you know, had no choice in the matter. In reality, American culture is part of that. It's a bunch of lost souls on a land that's not their own. It's just the only difference is that, you know, Black Americans, their ancestors didn't have the choice, you know, to be there. But being in places where people really identify with a part of, I don't know, a world that to me should be free for everyone to move around as they choose, and that these identities are so defining for them and these limitations in them is so disturbing to me sometimes, because it is limiting, you know, this attachment to these identities that were prescribed to us. And that's everywhere. Everywhere in the world has been prescribed these identities, and they become so attached to them. And truthfully, it's all like related to colonial like ideologies. So breaking like these mindsets individually is really interesting as you start looking and breaking down the things that you see around you and how much is really associated with it. So guys, I was just having this, I guess maybe this is my esoteric struggle as I have been evolving as a human, and I feel like there's not a lot of evolution on a grander scale. And I know in the United States, like, there's a whole like war on the woke, which is becoming a whole different thing. So guys, subscribe to my channel. And I guess not just in the United States, it is here in Italy as well. It's just different words, right? Guys, subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to talking to you guys in the comments. I really appreciate my new subscribers as well, and I hope that we can all have a little chat. Guys, ciao for now.